being a photographer. Like this was the goal, right? Like the jobs will get bigger, knock on wood, hopefully. And I will continue to be able to do that. But this was the goal. You know, this is not a career of I'm going to get that job and then that's it, right? There always has to be something next, or else you were a photographer.
Hello and welcome to the Creative Lotus Podcast. I'm your host, Alan Zaki. Hello and welcome to the Creative Lotus Podcast. On this week's episode, we have photographer Josh Fogel. Welcome to the podcast. I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the podcast, Josh.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you for being here. So I always like to start off things, just diving right on in, going back to your childhood. If you could tell us kind of where you were born and raised and maybe what ultimately brought you here to Los Angeles.
Well, I was born and raised here in Los Angeles. Surprise. Oh. Yeah. I was born in at St. John's of Santa Monica. My family lived in the Valley. I'm a Valley boy. Went to high school in Reseda. I've lived in kind of like all different pockets of LA, and now I reside in Altadena.
Nice. What was it like growing up here in Los Angeles? I mean, you're kind of a rare breed. Let's be real. There aren't very many Angelinos that are originally from here. So what was that like growing up here? And kind of how did your childhood influence kind of you becoming a photographer?
I mean, I grew up in a great era of LA, right? Like I grew up in the Valley at the height of like Valley boy culture. I know I'm dating myself, but yes, I'm really that old. But yeah, skate culture was a huge part of our lives. You know, it was at the era where video cameras just became kind of like accessible. So my dad had one, so I took his and I would, you know, video my friends skateboarding.
Nice.
And I've always loved photography as a medium. So taking pictures was just what you did. We didn't have, you know, a camera with us all the time. So, you know, when you took pictures, like you actually had to like think about it because it was,
right.
You know, it wasn't super inexpensive, but you know, it still cost cash money.
Yeah, for sure. I missed, Go ahead. Keep on going.
Nope. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I miss those days. I was actually talking on set the other day about how I miss the days of taking the film to like your local grocery store and then waiting the hour plus. And then like, it was like magic, right? You come back with all these shots of, you know, little, 4x6 prints. And then it was like, you know, the ones with the thumb in front of the flash and in front of the lens. So it looked like shit, you know, and you'd throw those out. Right. But then there was some like great keepers. So yeah.
Oh, totally. Era. Yeah. No, in terms of like the trajectory, like I always loved, photography as an art form. As a kid, I like painted and sketched and did things. My dad was an artist for a period of his life. He painted and did stained glass, and I loved watching that process. And then, you know, I worked in radio in a voiceover production studio when I was like 18. I got an internship and I did some voiceover work and studied a little bit of audio engineering. And then I left that and worked like in the retail world. I did a lot of security work. And then I moved my way into television and I worked in TV production for about 8 years. Wow. And then there was a big writer's strike and nobody worked for like 18 months. And so I went back to, you know, the safe choice and not the safe choice, but the retail security world, mostly as a internal investigator, things like that. But, you know, we did our shoplifting thing and got in some fights and have some good stories. And while I was working at Fry's Electronics, I got a good deal on a 30D with a kit lens, and started taking pictures. And, I had an opportunity to go to China, and Russia. And I took the camera with me and I came home and I just had a lot of terrible photos, like content wise, like obviously like I was capturing moments, but I had no idea what to do with this box. And I was really, really down on myself. And I was like, I felt like I had this lifetime opportunity, never knowing if I would go back or do anything like that again. And so I started like, you know, doing my homework and trying to figure out what is, you know, aperture and shutter speed and all of that. And then a lot of it just started to click. And that was like 2005, I think.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. And then kept taking pictures. I have an older brother who's in a band, like everybody in LA. And so I was spending a lot of time on the Sunset Strip shooting bands, and I did some, really terrible cover art. And that led to meeting someone who, Jeff Leeds, who used to work at BuzzNet. And so he would send me to shoot Rihanna and Usher and like some actual like big shows. Thievery Corporation and Massive Attack was my first big doubleheader at what used to be the Gibson Amphitheater. And I just loved it. I loved it.
Amazing. So you kind of shared that you kind of learned on your own. Did you go to school and kind of master the craft even more? Or are you considered yourself to be self-taught?
I mean, that's such a loaded question. I feel like I had figured out a lot on my own, but then in 2011, I quit my job and I applied to Art Center, and I thankfully got in and graduated in 2014. So almost, so like 8 years ago.
Nice.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And that was a total game changer. I was very, very lucky to get in. I was very lucky to finish, because that had not been a trait of mine, finishing what I started before then. But man, what a total game changer. Not that everybody needs to go to art school. I know lots of super successful, super talented photographers, but I needed that root foundation. I needed that education, the business side of it, the how things worked. Like I knew from TV production how things worked, but photo production is a whole other game.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. I thank you for sharing so much. I did not know of your illustrious past and everything that you've kind of done before meeting you here in LA. So that's awesome. So I'm curious, I always kind of ask, what were maybe some of the struggles that you, when you first started out in doing photography, that you felt kind of kept you motivated or ultimately kind of pushed you to keep going? I feel like creatives have this tendency to constantly be up against, struggles, as everyone does, but the motivation to kind of keep going is sometimes found in those struggles. I had committed to this. And like I said, that one trip in 2005 when I went to China, that was a huge motivator, right? Like I was like, going through the photos, and technically they were terrible, right? Like I didn't know, I had obviously been shooting in manual, and I knew that I kind of knew the triangle, right? The aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO. But I look at photos that I was shooting at like a 25th of a second at like f/18 and at like 16,000 ISO, because I didn't know. I just didn't know. Yeah.
I knew that ISO made things brighter. And so I would just crank and crank and crank and crank, and I wasn't paying attention.
Got it.
But I've been I'm going to use this term because I know one of the other questions you're going to ask is going to contradict what I'm about to say, but I feel very lucky. I feel very lucky that I had the opportunity to go to Art Center. I had very lucky that I was shooting and assisting like right out of the gate. I had started assisting a few photographers before I had graduated. I had some really good clients that I was already shooting for. And being able to like graduate and just kind of keep sort of that working mentality and that working momentum was super important. Because if I had had that downtime, I would have been down on myself, and I would have fallen back on things that I had done in the past. Because, I had to work, I had to eat, I had to pay my rent, I had to do all those other things. Right. And I had kind of committed to myself that I was going to do everything I could to not have to make this my side hustle, right? Like this had to be everything. And I've been, knock on wood, I've been very lucky that I've just been doing that. I've been assisting, digiteching and shooting exclusively for 8 years.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's amazing. I think that's like the dream, right? Is to be able to do the craft and not consider it to necessarily be work, but really your passion, right? And what you want to do, and not getting, not having to go back to working security or, working retail or, taking on other jobs, but to be able to do that, full time is amazing, and making a living doing it, which is totally, the best. What has been kind of, you kind of shared already, when you were shooting concerts and stuff, but what has been maybe one of your biggest goals or achievements in your career thus far that maybe you're not so well known for, but that you feel has been kind of like this moment that you've been really working towards?
I mean, being the shooter, right? Like when you spend a lot of time on set as an assistant and a Digitech, it's lucrative. I love doing that kind of work. But the goal has been to be the guy with the camera, the person with the camera, right? To be the shooter. Mm-hmm. And so I've had some very, very, excellent opportunities brought to me from other photographers that I've assisted and been mentored by, who maybe had a client that wasn't available, needed a shoot on a day they weren't available, or just didn't have their budget, right? They were like, well, I can't do that for what you have, but let me introduce you someone who probably will.
Right.
And I've been able to parlay that into some really excellent work. That was the situation with in January of 2019. I was introduced to the team at TV Guide magazine, and I was able to shoot a few days of the TCAs, which really helped me start to build my celebrity book. I shot Mark Ruffalo and Kim Kardashian and Paris Hilton and Juliette Lewis, and just like this incredible. I mean, it's work, right? Like you have a handful of days where you're in a hotel room with a tiny, tiny little set. And they're just bringing people through, and everything has to be so dialed in and so locked in, because some sets it's going to be one person, and then all of a sudden they'll be like, all right, here's the cast of Making America, and it's 12 people, and you have to, make that work. And you have this many minutes.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So, and also, I do a lot of work with the Jessica Simpson collection, and that's another situation where I was on set. I was, assisting this photographer and sometimes digiteching, although she had a regular Digitech. And she took another position in the organization, and she said, Josh really knows the program, and he's a very talented photographer. And now I shoot all their e-com. I shoot all their editorials. I've shot Jessica a number of times, and I'm really grateful for those types of opportunities. Or photographers who also shoot music videos and know that I love shooting documentary stuff. So, hey, I'm shooting a music video. Can you come shoot BTS? And, sometimes the rate is the same as if they had brought me on to assist, and sometimes it's less and sometimes it's more. But I've committed to making the most of the opportunities when I have the camera in my hand. Even if I'm making less money, having the camera in my hand is the goal.
Yes, absolutely. Can you kind of expand upon, it's just for listeners and watchers out there, the world of celebrity is such kind of a mysterious thing. And so, cause you kind of, mentioned it, that you do work with celebrities and you do portraiture. Go check out his portraits. They're awesome. And I'm just curious, kind of, can you share some of, not necessarily stories, but kind of expand upon what is it like working with celebrities if someone wants to get into that field? And, you shared that you have assisted and also digital tech, and then ultimately, right, the goal is to become the photographer. But what is it like to work with someone like Kim Kardashian, for instance, on set? And even if it is like this short time frame, like how do you really connect with someone who has, a name and is a talent within the Hollywood realm?
Mm-hmm. Well, what I would say about her specifically is she's the consummate professional, right? She, talk about understanding the assignment, right? She has done this a million times. She was promoting a docu-series where she had partnered with an attorney and was working in a law firm towards overturning wrongful convictions of prisoners. And so, she is someone, like I said, she knows the tone that's appropriate. She knows exactly what she wants to give, etc. And so it's, I don't want to say it's not easy, right? Because obviously, like, the pressure is high, and she has her team standing right behind you, glued to the monitor and giving her feedback, etc. But she knows exactly what she needs to be giving, right? She knows what this needs to be communicating. And so there is no pulling something out of her, right? Like she is who she is. She understands her brand. I mean, I may have made micro adjustments and asked her, you know, based on what I was seeing from my monitor for the lighting. But beyond that, like she is who she is and she knows exactly what she's going to be delivering. Now, there are other celebrities who don't like having their photo taken, right? Actors, from my experience many times, it's the business of doing things, which is what drives their character, even if it's themselves. And so standing in front of a camera and doing something very static, very often is something that makes them uncomfortable. But I also happen to think that sometimes those little in-between moments are things that create something really special and really visually interesting. Yeah. But high pressure, sure. Yeah.
No, I was just going to ask, do you work well under pressure? Is that your thing?
I don't know that it's my thing, but I've done okay so far. Right? Like I've definitely been on set in all three stages, right? As an assistant, as a ditch check, and as a photographer, where everything suddenly goes wrong, right? Like something's not working, whether it's on the assisting side, a light's not working and the photographer has given me eyes, like what's going on? We need to shoot. Or the Digitech side where Capture One decides to take a nap. Or on the photographer side where just something just isn't working. Is it the background? Is it the lighting? Is it the styling? Is it that the artist that I'm working with, the talent that I'm working with, just found out her dog died and I'm trying to like keep her together because that happened. And that's really intense, but that's, you know, you're the ringleader, right? You are you know, this is the big top and you have to keep the circus going, and that can be challenging. But I find that just being a decent human being really helps, right? Not losing your cool, not, you know, there's no need for, you know, you just have to keep your shit together. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's very true. Absolutely. And yes, you can cuss on this. This is, there's nothing wrong with it. It's an explicit podcast. You can, this is not for your children. Cover your ears. No, I'm kidding.
Awesome. Because I'm not wearing any pants.
That's awesome. I love it. I think you make a really good point that maybe young photographers or, you know, don't necessarily understand, which is, you are the ringleader, you know, like everything is on the shoulders of the photographer, just like that of a director, you know, and so you're kind of controlling the set. And so what is your set like how do you kind of get into your groove and ensure that, you know, you're connecting with your subject and making sure they feel comfortable, everyone's happy on set? You know, are you a person that likes music? Do you like it to be quiet?
Snacks are really important for everyone. Snacks, bottled water, and music. You're right. Music is super important. You know, but I ask all the time, I'll ask talent or their team, like, what is this person like to listen to? What do you want to listen to? Oh, I listen to everything. And that's like the worst answer because tone and vibe is really important. I know some photographers who like go the extra mile and will set up like a Spotify playlist specifically for the thing, or will be live, you know, DJing, you know, through Spotify. And I think that's awesome. Especially, with music artists, right? I know some music artists who want to listen to their own music, and I know some music artists who want to listen to something totally obscure and you would never guess that was their taste. But I mean, we're all human beings. Like we all, like different things. Someone told me a story about a photographer who was shooting, Tupac for one of his album covers way back in the day. And that week, Hootie and the Blowfish had dropped their big album. And apparently Tupac wanted to listen to that album twice back, like the full album back to back during the shoot. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
but,
crazy.
You know, by contrast, I was on a job. We were shooting this, pop singer who had one single. She had never released anything other than that. We were not shooting video. It wasn't even BTS video. We were just shooting portraits for her cover. It was 2 hours and we listened to her one song over and over and over again at full club volume. And it was a lot. But that's what kept her and her team like locked in and motivated. And you know what? Whatever it takes. Like, this isn't about me, and this is about what brings the best out of your character.
Absolutely. Wow, that's crazy. I think I'd go insane. Although, as you probably know, because you've been on music video shoots, that's literally kind of what happens. Is that song? Yeah. Sections of it are just played over and over again at like the most blasting loud noise, so the artist can lip sync back to the song at whatever part they need to do for that shot. So, yeah,
sure, but that's that's not a choice. That's a necessity, right? Like you need that to happen. Like she was making a choice.
Yeah,
but it was her photo shoot.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm curious, kind of, what do you consider to be your greatest weakness? And when you kind of recognize that, how do you overcome it kind of quickly in the moment?
That's a good question. I'm not a great mood boarder. That's something that I've been working on. When people want a concept, I'm very visually inspired, right? Like when people send me mood boards or inspiration photos or other work they've done, etc., like I'm motivated by a lot of that. But putting a mood board together, I find is challenging. I can do it, and obviously, like Pinterest is amazing, but yeah, that's a hard one for me. Other things that used to be challenging for me that I'm finding I'm better at now, is just like directing talent. Like, okay, what do you want me to do? Right? Like when you do enough, when you shoot enough e-com with super talented models who you don't have to tell anything to, and then the next day you have to tell someone like where their eyes to be in the hands, and you have to be like super, super specific, and like you're like molding them. That's a big mindset shift, but I'm getting better.
Nice. Yeah. No, I mean, that I think any photographer, it definitely is something that you're constantly kind of having to remind yourself that, once again, you're the one in the driver's seat, and you have to really help this person in front of the camera, nail the pose and feel comfortable as well.
Right. Especially when you're not shooting people who are super comfortable having their photos taken, right? Like sometimes I do PR things with people who've never done a photo shoot. They sit behind a desk. Right. This is, it's for a book cover or whatever, and they're not comfortable with this at all. And the first thing they say when they come onto set is, I just want you to know I don't like having my photo taken, which usually, brings my response of, that's fine. I don't really like taking photos, which, makes them laugh. And yeah, I think I stole that line from someone, but I don't know who it was.
It's so good. I love that.
But that's a challenge, right? Like you need to really present an environment that encourages someone to relax and be comfortable, because having your photo taken for someone who's not in this on a regular basis is that can be very uncomfortable for people, and I empathize. I don't really like having my photo taken. Well, sometimes.
Yeah. No, it is. It's very uncomfortable. I mean, I'm sure you've taken self-portraits and stuff as well, but it is kind of awkward. Like this lens, big barrels just looking down at you, and there's nothing really on the other side of that. So you, as a photographer on the other side of that, have this almost responsibility to, once, like you said, put someone at ease and make them feel comfortable, and, hopefully capture their essence and, bring something out of them. Which is no easy feat for sure. And I kind of already touched on this, but I'm curious, has there been a moment in your career thus far that you feel like you've, quote unquote, made it, or a real big highlight of your career that you are just so proud of, or, a goal that you really wanted to achieve that you have achieved in your career thus far?
So what's interesting is the TCAs was a really excellent opportunity for me. The challenging part about doing that was I shot it in January of 2019. So I started the year with this amazing opportunity and this amazing, new book of photos. And then 2 months later, the whole world shut down. So whereas I thought that I was like, this is it. Like this is going to be my year. Like I'm just going to parlay this into a whole lot of other work. That didn't work out to be the case. Although licensing is an amazing thing. And the fact that the world was, completely shut down and no one was doing photo shoots, I was getting requests for photos that maybe would not have sold in the same way as they did. So financially, that was, I was able to parlay something out of that. But I feel like what I do, I love what I do. When I was only assisting, I loved that. And then I started digiteching because, photo assisting is a lot of heavy lifting. And so I'd rather, be the tech and, make a little more but that brings its own pressures. But just being a photographer, this was the goal, right? The jobs will get bigger, knock on wood, hopefully. And I will continue to be able to do that. But this was the goal. This is not a career of I'm going to get that job and then that's it, right? There always has to be something next, or else you were a photographer.
Wow.
I mean, there's things I would like to do, right? I would like to do a book at some point, and just keep doing what I'm doing, but keep exponentially growing, in my work, in my learning. I want to be a better person. I want to be all of these other things. And I have a kid now, and I'm about to have a second kid in November. And so really the goal is, thank you. I'm very excited. Really the goal is to, level up my clients so that I can work less, right? That's okay. So that's a goal that I will feel good about. If I'm not working, 22, 25 weekdays a month doing all these other things, then I can be home more. That's really the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I'm curious, you talk about prints and making books and stuff. Did you, when you went back to school at Art Center, did you go and learn analog, film photography and printing and all that?
Absolutely. In fact, the first year you're there, it's almost exclusively analog. We're shooting 4x5, 8x10, medium format, and 35, and the whole process. We didn't do roll film, although I would have been interested in learning how to roll my own film, but I guess I could do that now. But yeah, shooting large, medium format, processing your own film, making your own prints, dodging, burning, learning all the old school techniques of photoshopping images in the darkroom using filters, et cetera. Yeah, that was huge. I had never, it was at that time, 2011, digital photography was well established, and that's basically what we did, exclusively. Film at that point had kind of dwindled because, I mean, some people were still shooting, of course. It wasn't as popular as it is now, though. But there was a big learning curve. In fact, I remember week 2 of Black and White 1, Pete Szynski, who was the black and white professor, was in the lab in a big whiteboard, and he started writing some type of mathematical equations on the board and formulations. And I was like, holy shit, this is Art Center. This is art school. I don't know math. I can't do math. I thought I was screwed. But you figure it out, and there's a lot of chemistry, et cetera, which I totally sunk my teeth into. I thought it was all fascinating. It really is magical making a print.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you still shoot analog now? Are you still into the film? I know you made a really good comment, which is it's become popular again, ironically, and also amazingly, but just curious, are you an analog shooter?
I do. I don't have a lot of clients who request it, although I have a few because they want that aesthetic. But for personal stuff, absolutely. I haven't shot large format in about 2 years. I have a Cambo 4x5 camera that I bought when I was in school. But I do. I like analog. I like that it really makes you think about what you're shooting, especially for personal projects, and some fine art stuff that I like doing. I have a Hasselblad that, I love to drag around, and sometimes, it sits in the bag. If I go on vacation, it doesn't get shot, but I try to. My wife, Rachel, is a photographer as well, and she shoots almost exclusively analog. And so she's always been a big proponent of, no, take the Mamiya, take the, whatever. Even if it's just, we have this little Contax instant, point and shoot, which takes beautiful photos. And she's constantly trying to push me to shoot more film.
Yeah. That's awesome. I didn't know that your wife was a photographer as well. That's so cool.
She is. Well, she's a fine art photographer. She also paints and sculpts, and she teaches. She teaches photography at the community college down in Walnut, Mount Sac.
Oh, wow. Okay. Very cool. That's so awesome. Yeah. Very artistic family you have. Yeah, no, I think it's interesting because film has become, popularized again. But I feel like printed work, like printing your actual photos, is not as common. Do you kind of enjoy printing your work and seeing it kind of printed out, or do you do that? Or is it something that you've kind of, become more digitized and kind of kept the cost, if you will, down as well?
It depends. There are definitely some things where I'm like, man, I would love to see this as a print. And so I have like a whole stack of things that need to be printed just for my own use. And then, I have clients who, if I do personal projects, or even, musicians or things that I've shot who request like a print. I like that process. I definitely get support from someplace like Icon or, I refer to the professionals. But I really try to get the file at least to as close as possible. And then if they needed to make some type of tweak in order to make it really print ready, I trust them. But yeah, I always think that I'm always flattered because I understand the investment, not only the investment in purchasing the print, but the framing and all of that. And it's kind of like the highest compliment. Yeah. It's nice when you take a photo of someone and they put it on their Instagram or it ends up on the back of a book or their website or whatever, or if they make it their avatar for Twitter. But the permanence of someone requesting and purchasing a print is kind of the highest compliment at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the biggest thing I miss of photography is the tangibility of it, like the prints, the books, even like Polaroids. I mean, you still have, a bunch of options, but the ability to see that, print in person and feel it and, the quality it really shows, or lack thereof too. Sometimes when you're like, oh, you can really tell there's a digital print. But yeah. I feel like there needs to be more of a focus on the printing of things, because I feel like it really shows how much work and effort as photographers you put into your craft. So yeah. I'm curious, kind of what brings you the most happiness now versus maybe when you first started out, if there's kind of a difference in time, if you will.
I mean, there is a difference in time because, I'm a dad now. And so that brings its whole other level of happiness. So what brings me great joy is working really hard and then being able to take time off to be with my kid and my wife and kind of be home. But it also brings itself anxiety. Like I don't, idle hands, right? Like I'm learning to take time off, whether that's, I've always been a worker bee, right? Like I've always, when I was in TV production, like, you work your ass off, and through Art Center, like I worked that was my job. Like I worked my ass off to do well. And then building a career as an assistant and as a photographer, like you have to grind, like you have to be always working. And sometimes that's hard to turn off and that's hard to unlearn. And so that's a challenge. So what brings me joy? Being on set, being in a studio and looking over and being like, fuck yeah. Like that's right. Like you take that one of those like first frames where like everything's been dialed in and you look over and that this is just going to be so good. And that this is going to be something you just nailed it. Right. Like, and I feel like anyone who works in a craft field, like right? Like you see basketball players and they shoot their shot and long before the ball gets to the rim, like they know they did it. Right. And so This is kind of similar. Like, you're crushing it. The end of the day, when it's just like high fives all around and the client can't wait to see the photos. And your team knows that they just pulled everything together. Like that's a rush for me. Like that really makes it feel like all of the work I've been doing and all of the things that I've been learning and struggling for and fighting for, and all the sleepless nights and all of the hard work of putting things together and really figuring things out. When that comes together like that, man, that just feels so good. It's humbling. It's really humbling, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So you already kind of answered my next question, which is, what is your work ethic like? And, staying in this creative field is not easy and everything, but maybe if you could just share, like, what is a day in the life like for you now as Josh Fogel, the photographer?
I love taking my kid to school. My kid just started school. And so I take my kid to, if it's a day that I don't have a shoot, right? Or if I don't have an early call, I like taking my kid to school. It sounds so like Leave It to Beaver. But it's true. I love it. Like, I'm so proud of her. She's doing great. I do, all of the other things. Like I do the emailing, and I do the, hey, what's up? Haven't talked in a while. Like, let's put something together. Or I should do more self-promotion other than like social media or being on friends' podcasts. But I really need to do better about that. But I do file organization. I do editing. I'm sending out proofs. I'm sending things to a retoucher. I'm putting mood boards together for upcoming shoots or even just collabs. Like, I still do, we call them tests, but I feel like it's not really a test. Like, it's a collab. It's a test if someone's coming and they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
But I love putting together collabs and creating fun things that we can then show to clients, being like, this is what we can do. This is what this team is about. That's what I do. I spend a lot of time looking at images and being inspired and being like, dissecting, right? That was one thing we were taught in school, is to look at a photograph and like dissect how this was done. How was it lit? Like, what are the elements involved, et cetera, which sometimes can be tough when something's been super retouched, right? Like, how do you, when the catch lights have been taken out of the eye, right? Because we really only want one catch light, but there are other lights because you see a fill light and this. And so, in post, they took out this catch light, but they left this one. And I love that stuff. But just figuring out what's next. It's always about what's next. I don't,
nice.
I don't really see an end zone. There's just what's next.
Yeah. I love that. So you talked about becoming a dad. Did you, if I'm not mistaken, was your daughter born during the pandemic?
She was. Yeah, she was born in May of 2020, which was right smack dab in the middle of the lockdown, which was a super surreal and interesting experience.
And how has that been? I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Honestly, it was kind of, and this is going to sound terrible, like, if there's a silver lining, and that is if in full capitals, italicized, like bigger than the rest of the text, if there is one, it's that I thought I was going to be super dead, right? I'll take off 2 weeks before the baby comes, and I'll take the whole month of June off. And I was home till August. And being home with Rachel and Iris during those first 3 months of her life, every day, I didn't have to think about work, although I was shooting some things in my home studio for like lay downs and things like that, just to keep things moving. That was great. It has brought on other challenges, right? Like, socialization is tough for a little kid who's been home for the first 2 years of her life and hasn't really been many other places, although we've taken like road trips, et cetera. But yeah, the pandemic was, like I said, it created an opportunity for licensing for images that I had already taken, especially celebrity work. It was challenging because once things picked up again, it was really slow and everybody was super cautious. But I was able to shoot a little bit at home and just be home. I built this office during the pandemic. I, did some things to the house because we had just moved in August of 2019. So we hadn't been here that long. So that created an opportunity to build a space for me to work because my office was going to become a nursery. But yeah, it was a unique experience that I one day look forward to telling her about and having her like understand like kind of the world she was born into.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I'm curious, kind of going deeper into that. How has having Iris really kind of affected you as a photographer? Like, do you see yourself creating differently because now that you have this title of dad or father?
Well, I definitely shoot less porn than I used to. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Oh my God. That's so good.
Yeah, like it definitely has changed. Like it definitely has been more of a motivation for me to kind of work my way out of assisting and into the photographer position, kind of like time to put on those, big kid pants. Because like I said, because the goal is to work for clients that have better budgets, so I don't have to work as much. Not that I don't have to work as hard. I'm always going to work as hard, but as much. And so I can have the time to be home. Like last week was her first week of school, and I basically took the whole week off so that I could, be there if if she was having a hard time, the school would call and I would go. And that was really important to me. Like that has become paramount. Like she is, family is not that family shouldn't be number one, but it definitely is. And, kind of pushing me to now it's time to be harder, work harder. Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. Gosh, going to school, the first days of school for a little one. So exciting, but also, tough. Terrifying. A lot of crying. Lot of crying. Yeah. But so the school she goes to, sorry.
No, go ahead.
She'll be 2.5 in November.
Got it.
Yeah. Which is amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, which is amazing. Like she talks in basically sentences. Sometimes you have to kind of like decode what she's trying to communicate, but she's gone from being this entity that is completely completely dependent on you to, she's becoming more and more independent and self-sufficient. And it's amazing watching her grow and figure things out and be funny. Like she likes being funny because she knows we respond. And so she does that funny thing over and over again, or someone else comes over. And so she does the funny thing to see if they think it's funny too. And it's amazing. Yeah. She's my joy, and she's going to be a great older sister. And I'm really looking forward to that new chapter and all the stress that brings.
Yes. You can do it all over again. Round 2 this time. Yeah,
exactly.
That's awesome. Yeah. So good. I wanted to know kind of what is one thing that you've learned about yourself being a photographer and really being in this industry that you may not have really known before when you're doing, broadcast and security and all these other jobs.
I feel like a lot of the work I've been has been not that photo shoots are about the photographer. In fact, I pretty much believe that they aren't, right? But being like turning on that mode has been really learning how to turn on that mode. And like I talked about before, being the ringleader and communicating with the subject and build it, like very, very quickly building that rapport is great. Like I love that, especially moving from the assistant side, where very often, like, depending on the photographer you're working for, assistants should be seen and not heard, sometimes not even seen, to, being the, hey, how's it going guy? And figuring out what my version of that is. Like I've seen other photographers, and some people tell jokes, and some people, I don't know, do other things. Like everyone has like their thing. Right. And so figuring out what that thing for me has been really a lot of fun and helped me kind of like, I don't know, come into my own. Not that I've been a wallflower, but that has been in my other careers, that's kind of been the role, is from the sidelines, fly on the wall. And even in documentary work, right? Like being a fly on the wall is sometimes very important. And very often in photo shoots, when you're the photographer, that's not the case. And sometimes I forget that, like, oh, right, I'm the one who's supposed to be kind of setting the tone. And so that's been a fun experiment.
Yeah. So you just kind of talked about, and I would love to dive deeper into kind of the reportage or documentary work that you've done. I know that you have a portfolio on your site called US Military, which is really interesting and really beautiful work. And you also kind of mentioned, right, your start was going to both China and Russia. So I'm kind of curious, like, how did you kind of get into that documenting of events and places? And where's the drive or interest there for you?
So a big motivation throughout a lot of my photography, before I knew anything about studio work, was about the narrative. I have, and this comes from my own history in terms of my childhood and upbringing, adolescence, etc. My brain doesn't work in a very timeline sense. I have a very hard time and kind of always have. I kind of working backwards and identifying when things have happened, like specifically in my life. Like I know things that happened in my 20s or in my teens or when I was in high school, et cetera. But there are a lot of people who go, oh yeah, that was in 1992 or 96 or whatever. And it takes me longer to do that. And so since I was a young person, taking photos and documenting things has been a way to help me do that. It's a visual reference to when things happened. And so, I have boxes and boxes of books of photos that I took as a kid and as a teenager, et cetera. But it was a way of helping me kind of like document my own timeline and my own existence, to help me remember. Because I have, this will be a whole other podcast of things that I don't have access to from when I was a kid and when I was a teenager, et cetera. But I've always loved telling the story. It's one of my frustrations of not having gotten into video sooner is that would have given me another avenue for telling those stories. But the work I do in Russia, I've been 7 times for the Joint Distribution Committee. It's this international Jewish outreach program. My grandmother had started a program there many, many years ago in the Russian Far East in Siberia, allowing the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the Jews who were sent to the gulags to be B'nai Mitzvah'd. And so I went to the Joint and proposed that if they were able to get me there, that I would spend time with the B'nai Mitzvah kids and document it so that we could use those photos for promotion, right, for fundraising, et cetera. And also to have this document of all of these years of these kids coming into the program and really what that represents. I've met some incredible people through the program. I've met older people who brought, their grandson or granddaughter to it's basically summer camp, for a week, and they learn about Judaism, they learn the prayers, etc. And then at the end of the week, they have a big B'nai Mitzvah. And I've met people who remember what it was like to have to do Shabbat in the basement of their home because it was illegal. And what it was like being forced out of the cities, et cetera. And so telling that narrative and also that ties into like street photography and even the concert stuff is very documentary. There's this very special thing that's happening and it lasts this long, and being able to, translate that experience to an audience, I think is a really powerful thing. And I've loved to, had the opportunity to do that. So with the U.S. military, I had a cousin of mine, Shelby, who was a sergeant in the Marine Corps. She'd been out on 2 MEUs, which are a Marine Expeditionary Unit, basically overseas for 90 days or whatever. And the Navy has this program where they can invite a civilian through this lengthy interview process and the physical and all these other things. Like you have to kind of like explain why you should be a part of the program and that you're not a terrorist, et cetera, to meet the ship in Honolulu at Pearl Harbor, and basically like live on the ship from Pearl Harbor as it sails to Camp Pendleton. So it's 10 days. And so obviously the Navy has their own photographer, but I was able to bring like a digital camera and a film camera and live on the ship and be with the Marines and the sailors as they're in like the last 10 days of this deployment. And it was a really fascinating experience. I mean, for the most part on the Marine side, they just want to get home. Like this is the last leg. They just want to get home. The Navy is still working because they're always working on the ship.
Right.
But with the Marines, like we did PT, we did field pistol training on the flight deck. We hung out. We were on, I was able to hang out with them on the smoking deck, and they were really just open to having their picture taken. And obviously, like I sent everybody, copies of what I did. And so that the first time I was on the USS San Diego, and the second time was on the Harper's Ferry. Talk about being, as photographers and as documenters, we're always interested in the other, right? There is this, help me create an opportunity where I can be a part of a society that I basically have no business being a part of, and otherwise would have no opportunity to be in, and then tell that story through visuals, through photos or video or whatever it is you do, to be able to communicate to other people who don't have that opportunity what this life is really like, right? We've all seen movies and we know how that's interpreted, but what is life like for a Marine who's been stuck on a boat for the last 3, 5, 6 months?
Right.
And so, for example, on the Harper's Ferry, the second time I went, when they landed, I believe I'm getting the story right, when they landed in Pearl Harbor, they had been on ship and had not seen land in 3 months because they had been posted in what they call a box out, which is basically the ship can never stop moving when it's at sea. It doesn't just like sit and float. It has to be moving. And in order to do that, the ship moves in squares. So it moves, the ship goes forward and then it turns right and right. So it's constantly doing like this in the ocean. So, and they were off the coast of Jordan for 90 days because at that time there was some conflict there and they weren't sure if they were going to be called in. So they had been doing this, in the ocean for 3 months. And by the time I got there, they were so, tired of being on ship because the Marines don't have a lot to do on ship. Sometimes they have jobs, etc. But for the most part, they're just like sitting and waiting. They're playing video games. They're doing PT. They're playing cards. They're just, they do other types of trainings, but for the most part, they're just killing time. So I would go back. If I could go back once a year, I would definitely do it. It was an awesome experience.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing. I'm not going to lie. I thought you had a connection personally to the military or something. I wasn't sure if that, you had gone to the Army or, Navy or something, but
not this kid. I had thought about it, when I was younger, I think as a lot of people do. But I didn't think that was the path for me. So no, I was there as a guest. But I'm really, proud. They say that there's like, 2 or 3% of the world who have spent time on a warship. And while I wasn't there on an official capacity, I know how small those bunks are, and I know how loud those engines are, and I know how the world does this when you're trying to do anything. So it was a very unique experience that I feel very proud to have been a part of.
Yeah. No, they're really amazing portraits and such an intimate look at their life on that ship. So,
Thank you.
They're really amazing. Yeah. I was so intrigued by it. I was kind of like, oh, wow, you don't really get to see that unless, you are like the U.S. Navy's photographer or something like that. But to be able to like embed yourself, for lack of a better term, and be a part of kind of what was going on was cool.
What's interesting about what you just said is there was a Navy photographer on each ship, who are, they are, sailors or they are Marine Corps. But they are very, very restricted in what they can photograph and what they can't, because, everything has to be within regulation, and the Navy is very specific about the what they put out there, et cetera. And I was a little nervous about that when I went and when I presented the idea of why I was being invited to come. And there were some areas of the ship that I wasn't allowed on, and there were some areas of the ship that I wasn't allowed to photograph in. But other than that, I kind of had, carte blanche to do what I wanted within certain guidelines. But that was an opportunity I had that even their Navy photographers don't have. But to be honest, like it's a very visually stimulating environment, right? Like unless you really don't know what you're doing, it's kind of hard to take a bad picture in an environment like that. But if you have a little bit of knowledge, like you really can create something interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, kind of who has been your biggest supporter or fan throughout your entire career thus far? And how have they really kind of helped you to keep going?
I mean, Rachel, my wife, has been incredible. She is always my biggest fan, and I'm her biggest fan as well. So it works out. People ask a lot if there's like any kind of conflict between two photographers in one house. But the truth is we make very different work. In fact, we've talked about doing like a his and hers show, like a gallery show, because she and I have the ability to go somewhere we want on a trip, or even we used to love to go downtown and shoot, and come away with very different work. I'm very geared towards people, and she will do everything she can to wait for people to clear out so that she can shoot what she wants. And so we have very different perspectives on what that looks, on what photography is, and what our work should look like. But beyond that, I have like an incredible network of friends and mentors and creators that I work with, both as peers or on the assisting or Digitech side, who have been really, really supportive. I have some photographers that I used to assist who are like, I'm not going to hire you as an assistant anymore because you need to be putting more energy into making work and getting work, which I get and I appreciate, and that's like a huge compliment, but also like I have bills to pay, so let's keep working, right? Like, yes, I promise to do those other things, but also call me. And I'm grateful to those people. Again, like I talked about before, the photographers that I know who are like, hey, Josh would be great for this, or, I can't do this because I'm not available. I just did a big job for one of my bigger clients who originally started that way. It was someone had been shooting for them for a good length of time and felt like their career was moving on to something else. And they were like, I have to go do this other thing. I'm sorry, this doesn't work for me anymore, but here's someone who I think would be a really good fit. And and they bought it. They bought it.
No, I think, You talk about connection being obviously so important, right? And I think that without those connections and the community, if you will, within the photo industry, is so unique, but also so important, because so much of it is about a referral and the relationship you have with people that you work with. So I have found the tagline for being successful in this industry is don't be a dick, right? Like that, right? When it comes down to it, like who I hire or who hires me, like personality is super important. I know some people who are super talented. I went to school with some people who are super talented. And they're just, and have hit me up for like assisting roles. But they're just not good. They're fantastic photographers, and I'm sorry to say this to them, but they're just not good assistants. Like it takes a certain personality, but also like, can I spend 3 days in a van with you? Right? Like if we're going on a road trip, we have an assignment and we got to be touring or whatever. Can I spend 3 months in a bus with you? Right? Like that's important. And when I'm putting together a team, like I have my go-to people who I know how to be, they know how to be on set. I know that, nobody brings an ego, which was always a big thing for me when I'm assisting, is I bring no ego. Like I know my role, whether or not I feel like I'm a better photographer than this other person, not today, right? Like take it home. But don't be a dick, like be a decent person, and things come around, pay it forward, and things will work out for you. Absolutely. Yeah. So you kind of already touched on this as well, but, COVID-19 obviously affected everyone in all different types of ways. But now that we're, all the way through almost 2022, which is crazy. We're already in September. How did you kind of, after the first, say, year and your daughter was born and, you kind of, how did you keep going through that and then kind of pick back up in order to kind of ensure that you stayed in this business and kept working?
A lot of nasal swabs and masks. Like there was,
Yes.
I've talked about with people who are as busy as I am. I wish I had kept count on how many times, we went in for get testing, because it has to be in the 100. There were times I was tested like 6 times a week. Like it was a lot. I think that just, keeping crews small was important. Testing, masks was important. But I mean, I think in our industry, like there was a moment where things started to loosen up and people were comfortable working. And then there was a surge of work. Like companies were desperate for content, like content. Whether if you were in entertainment, posters, key art, unit production photography. And that's also something that I have tried to kind of like keep me moving, is I never wanted to be the photographer who only shoots half-ripe persimmons, right? Like I never wanted my career to be like that specific. Like, have I shot food? Yeah. I've shot kids. I've shot, socks and mannequin feet. Like I've shot e-com. I've shot BTS. I've shot portraits. I've shot architecture. I've shot with a drone. Diversifying what you do will help keep you busy. There is work out there as long as you're, a decent photographer, and as long as you're not a dick. Like there's work to be had. You may not be on a billboard. It may not be, a movie poster. It may not be your dream job, but if you want to work, there's work. And especially if you're an assistant. A buddy of mine who I won't mention, this January, put on his Instagram stories. He was like, basically, look, if you're a photo assistant and you're in LA right now and you're not completely booked out, you're garbage. Like basically saying like there is so much. There was a period of time where there was so much work out there that as long as you were making people, letting it known that you were available, there was work. And so I think diversifying is really important. I feel like at a certain level in your career, you should be niche and like, this is what I do. But until you get there, like be willing to do other things if you want to stay busy.
Yeah. And don't be a dick. Damn it.
And don't be a dick, yes. Right? Yeah. You can you can ask lots of my friends, lots of the people that I work with. They know that is, I don't even think I made it up. I think someone else said it, but it is like so true. Just don't be a dick on any end of this, right? If you're a producer, I feel like the era of photographers who yell and this and that and are terrible to their assistants at Digitex, I think that's so antiquated. And I feel like the people who are notorious for that, from what I've heard, have changed a little bit because they know that that's antiquated. Like it's unnecessary. Yes, sometimes it's high pressure, but we're not curing cancer. We're just making things look pretty. And yes, sometimes a lot of money is on the line and et cetera, but we know what we're doing. We've done this 100 times. Not our first rodeo. We can do this. Yeah. Don't be a dick.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you can't afford to at this point, right? The industry is such a small niche community. Like, right. I know you and I have a lot of mutual friends, and you have your own group of people, and I have mine, but they might even know each other. So, and then
I'm sure they do.
Said, if it comes back to referrals, it comes to referrals, and it's like, who are you going to refer? The guy that was an asshole once that you worked with, or the guy that can like kill it every single time and has a great personality and wants to like work,
Yeah.
So your friend, the friend that posted that story is making a very good point. I'm curious though, have you noticed that now that we're kind of nearing the quote unquote, I'm air quoting here, people, the end of COVID, in the sense that, Omicron kind of but a lot of people got COVID during Omicron, at the end of last year and beginning of this year. But have you noticed that things have gone back to normal for business, if you will, more so this year than even say 2021?
Yeah. I mean, there's less, things are still busy, but not like that initial rush of, content.
Right.
There's less testing happening now. I mean, I have a test scheduled for Tuesday, but a lot of sets aren't testing as much. There's still a lot of masking, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm the only one wearing a mask on set. I've been on jobs where we're all shooting outside and nobody's wearing a mask, and we try not to be on top of each other. But there are some jobs where I ask about testing, like, hey, is there going to be testing? And it's kind of like, no, like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? Like, we're done with that, right? Like, yeah. And by the way, that hasn't translated into bigger budgets. Like the fact that we were spending $1,000 to $2,000, $3,000 on testing before doesn't mean that money's now available for other things. Now that money has just disappeared, which I think is interesting.
Like magic. Poof.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, on a side note of that, I will say I heard on set actually from, I don't know who it was, but apparently a lot of these companies that were doing the testing, and we won't say names, but they're getting sued by big companies, like big studios, because apparently there was a lot of false negatives that were being had. And so it was questions of whether tests were actually being tested, like the actual samples were being tested and stuff. So that's scary. I mean, that's terrible. A lot of accountability in that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was kind of the go-to. That was that one place that we won't even rhyme their name, but we all know what we're talking about. I mean, from what I read in the initial complaint that was out, the news was, it wasn't a large number. It was actually a fairly small percentage of the number of tests that they do, but who cares? Like, even if it was 100, like whatever it is, like that's horrible. Like people were putting like their lives basically, literally, putting their lives in the hands of this information. Don't tell me you were bullshitting it. Like, come on, just do your job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the name of this podcast is The Creative Lotus, and that was really born out of COVID. And I say that only because during the time I realized when we were down and, didn't really have a lot of stuff going on, that, creatives have this tendency to have a lot of struggle, right? It's not easy to work in this industry as a freelancer and constantly kind of having to take the shit, if you will, but creating like this beauty or the lotus, right? And so the simultaneity of the lotus actually being able to bloom and seed at the same time, I thought that was kind of a great metaphor for like the creative life. And so I'm curious if you could share, what are some of the struggles or the shit that you've had to put up with that you ultimately felt fueled you to ultimately have this great, blossoming career, or this lotus blossom?
Well, number one, I think what you're doing is great. Like, I've listened to a bunch of them. I recently listened to the one you did with our friend Nicole and Matt, whose name last name I'm not gonna butcher. But I love what he's doing. But I think. Yeah. So here's two things, right? So number one, you're absolutely right? Like, we freelancers have a hard life. Like it is hard to maintain a career as a freelance person. However, what I will say is that when things shut down and when much of our country was either like laid off or deferred or whatever, freelancers, in my experience, have a particular set of skills that help us create opportunities, right? Like, if you worked in a bank and that bank shut down, or you got fired from the bank, I'm not saying you don't know how to do other things than be a banker, but that's what you were doing. And maybe you have other skill sets and you could try to go do those other things. But for freelancers, we do a lot of other different things, and there are other ways of getting work for us. And so I feel like we are better, maybe just built in a way that allowed many of us to survive. I mean, I know some people who didn't, right? Lots of people moved back home. Lots of people went and got other jobs. I know people who were working in photo and film that now aren't because they decided to go do something else, which I think is great. I think one thing it did is it created an opportunity for people to be like, what I've been doing isn't working and I'm going to go find something else to do. And I've seen lots of people flourish in things that they hadn't dared do, but the lockdown and COVID gave them the bravery or whatever to go do that thing.
Right.
For me, I started shooting product, which I had never really done before because I have a garage and I have a lot of my own equipment. And so I would reach out to people. I had a couple friends who started clothing lines in the middle of COVID because what else are you going to do? And so they would ship me clothing and I would shoot it. I would do laydowns and shoot it in my garage, and it allowed me to be home and safe and still work. Because, I can't just not do something. I would go cuckoo, which is why, things like this project, like I built this office and I replaced a fence and I did some landscaping and, is my chair making a lot of noise? I'm so sorry. I just realized that. That was the chair. That was 100%. This whole time it's been the chair. You got to bob and weave because that's what our industry is built on, unless you are in-house, which I know lots of photographers who work in-house and that provide security and all of that. I'm all for it. I choose to do it this other way.
Right. Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you for sharing. I think, kind of looking to the future, can you share some maybe goals that you have set for yourself for the next, I don't know, even this next year? Obviously you have another baby on the way, which is exciting, but then, even 3 to 5 years from now, maybe some milestones or goals that you have set for Josh Fogel.
Well, I think like I said, the goal is kind of to elevate the level of clientele that I have so that I can work, do that work and be home more. That's kind of the goal. But I mean, just keep grinding and being the creative that I feel like I'm molding into and being better at what I'm doing and doing what I'm doing, but maybe on a bigger scale. Like I've started doing some, in the last couple of months, I've shot some key art for independent films, and I've really enjoyed kind of that process of working with filmmakers and working through what a single frame visual representation of their movie would be. And I really, really like that. I've shot some key art for upcoming TV shows, which I also really, really like, which is something that I've gained experience on by working with other photographers who do that kind of work. Not that I'm looking to make, not that I'm looking to compete with anyone who has helped me through my career. Like, there's enough for us to go around, I think. Although some people see it that way, and that's, unfortunate. But yeah, just kind of doing that and finding other avenues for myself to do PR work for actors and actresses. And I've shot some, interesting book covers and a lot of things that are kind of like, when you first start out in photography and you're doing a lot of tests, it's like you shoot it and you edit it and you put it on your Instagram. It's like, look what I just did. I shot this yesterday. I shot this last week, whatever. But now I've kind of moved myself with many of these clients into a position where like I have work I shot a year ago that I'm like, come on, I want to show people this so they know I can do this and then I can get other work from it. But you have to be patient and I get that. But it's frustrating sometimes. It's like it exists and I want to share it. Like I want to use it. Like, come on, let's make more work out of this other work. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Just more and more, just keep it coming. Like I will keep grinding as long as people keep calling.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So kind of this question is always funny and people flip it and reverse it as Missy might say, but if you were able to talk to your future self 15 years from now, what would you tell your future self?
Oh, my future self. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I would tell myself to take it easy on the girls. They're teenagers and they don't know any better, and they'll be your friend again. I promise. That's what I would say about my girls. Cause in 15 years they will be, 15, almost 15 and 17. And as many other parents have told me, just prepare for having 2 teenage girls in the house.
Yes.
And take it easy on their partners, boys, girls, whatever they're interested in. Take it easy on their parents, on their partners. They'll figure it out. But career wise, that's a really good question, and I'm not going to flip it. I'm going to try to stick to your question. Just never forget like how hard these years were, but how important and how much growth there has been. And that's a good question. Just stay, hopefully I'm still in the game. Like, are you still a photographer? That I would ask that. Are you still, right? Do you have a bookstore? Like, what do you do now? Am I still married? Like all of those important questions. Remember this period of time, because I really do feel like, and I try to stay humble. Being humble is super important to me. Ego is the death of us all. I really believe. But like, I hope I am just as hungry and just as motivated and just as humble about how grateful I am to be doing what I'm doing. I'm gonna share this with you, and I'm gonna try not to be really emotional about it, but I have all of the good things I have in my life because of this industry and because of photography. I took a big risk. I had a huge benefactor who gave me the opportunity to go to Art Center, and it was basically, he presented to me as, I can either help you do this now and I can watch you succeed, or when I die, you can afford to do it on your own. And that was really all it took. I was like, all right, I don't know that this is something that's going to work out, but I'm going to try. And because of that opportunity, I went to Art Center, and I have the network I have largely because of the people I knew and know through Art Center. But also, like, I met my wife while, because I became a photographer, because she worked in a camera store, and I have my house. We bought a house in 2019, and I have my house because of how hard I've chosen to work in this industry. And I have my kids. Like, I don't know that those are choices I would have made unless I was feeling like I was headed in a road to success. So I would ask my future self, I didn't forget. I would tell my future self to remember that that's how we got here, that we got here because we made a life choice late in life. Like, I was in my mid 30s when I decided to go to Art Center and be a photographer. Like, that's not an easy thing to do because I was very comfortable. Well, I was what I thought was comfortable at the time. And I had told myself I wasn't going back to a freelance life because TV is freelance too, or so I thought. But that version of freelance is like 8 weeks of work, whereas now we get 1 day of work, or 3 days or whatever. But that's what I would tell my future self. Is remember how hard this was, but how fruitful this decision was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah.
You had a real, you had a real Barbara Walters moment. You can cut that other part out.
I love it. No, thank you for sharing. Yeah. I think that, I think too often we almost don't look to the future, right? Because we're just thinking, like you said, always forward, but we're still in the present. So that's why I like to ask that question. It's almost as though you're giving yourself an opportunity to make a statement to your future self, right? And I love that you just shared that, it is because of the decisions I made that I am at where I'm at now. So let's not forget that in the future when,
Right.
wherever I'm at and whatever I'm doing, still having a sense of appreciation for taking that risk. So that's
totally.
beautiful.
There's a great quote, because I know you're going to ask me about a different quote, and I have another quote lined up for that. But there's a great quote I will always remember, and it has been attributed to many different people, and so I'm not going to try to, pin it on one person, but I am the sum total of my experiences, right? Like I am who I am because of things I've experienced in my life, and I am who I am in spite of things that have happened in my life, right? Like right. I didn't just show up in this moment. Like anyone who, disregards their past and feels like I know that there are many different thoughts on what our past is, and our past is nothing, and only the future is important. And yes, the future is important, but my past is what has made me, for better or for worse, and I acknowledge them both.
Yeah. No, very well said. Absolutely. So then to go into the next section, which was exactly what you're talking about, is there one phrase or motto that you kind of live by, personal or professionally?
Absolutely. So don't forget, don't be a dick. Don't forget, I'm the sum total of my experiences. And also there's a Thomas Jefferson quote that I have always responded to, which is, I am a great believer in luck. And I find that the harder I work, the more of it I have, which translates to me that luck is a myth, and it is hard work and recognizing opportunity, and being able to rise to the occasion that really creates success. Be ready when opportunity knocks is one thing, right? Opportunity is knocking. I recognize it's knocking. Now what the fuck do I do? Right? Like being prepared to, to step up and get the job done. But also, I think it's also super important to, and I'm going to segue, super important to recognize when this is not a good opportunity for you, right? Yeah. Like if someone was like, hey, there's a new, whatever perfume and we need you to shoot blah, blah, blah. I've never done that before. Could I figure it out? Sure. Mm-hmm. Could I hire a crew to surround me and make me look good to do it? Sure. But would it also behoove me to say, you know what, this is kind of out of, depending on the situation, this is kind of out of my lane. I'm going to introduce you to someone who does this on the daily and is going to knock it out of the park for you. Like, I feel like that's also what helps our community grow. But yes, the quote is, I'm a great believer in luck, and I find the harder I work, the more of it I have. And you really make your own luck. Like you find $1, that's luck. Right? So you find $1 on the ground. That's good luck for you, but that was also bad luck for someone who lost $1, right? Like that's a part of the analogy that we forget, and just, don't be a dick, create your own luck. That's all, and be, it's not the whole pie isn't for you, right? Like you have to leave something on the table for other people. My grandfather told the story, or my grandmother told the story of my grandfather who passed away when I was a little kid, that he had gotten a bonus. This is like back in the 50s or whatever. He had gotten a bonus. He'd gotten like a $1,000 bonus, which back then was like 3 months salary or whatever. And he walks in and he says, honey, guess what? I got $1,000 bonus. And we're going to give $100 to the yeshiva, which is the rabbinical school. And my grandmother says, "What? Are you crazy?" She was like, "We need a washer, we need a this, we need a that, like whatever." And he goes, "Hold on a second, let's try that again." And he backs up to the door and he steps forward and he goes, "Honey, guess what? I got a $900 bonus, and I will always remember and share that story because it's true. Like if you something comes to you that's a gift." And you have the opportunity to share that with someone else who maybe needs it more or whatever, and while being charitable or philanthropic or whatever, you do that. And so, he got $1,000 bonus, but if he had gotten a $900 bonus, you wouldn't have missed that extra $100. And if you have an opportunity to do something with that extra $100, you do it. Yeah. So I got off track, but you got your quote and you got a story, and I hope that was worth it. Yeah,
so worth it. That was great. I love it. Yeah, I think Yeah, we talk about in Buddhism, not everything is necessarily based on luck so much as that you create fortune in your life, right? Which is similar to what that quote is saying, right? You're putting in all the work to create the fortune for your life so that like everything is in rhythm, right? So that you're constantly building it. But I love the way that you flipped that and said, right, we don't really think about how just because you found $1, which is lucky for you, it actually sucks for the other person who lost it. Right. So it's like the cause and effect, the synchronicity of that is also there. And definitely plays an effect. So this is amazing. Thank you so much. That kind of wraps it up for me. I really just want to know for everyone that's watching and listening, where can they follow you as well as find your work? I'll put links and everything down in the description below. For people that are just listening, where can they follow you and also take a look at all of your work?
At Josh_Fogel is my Instagram, and joshfogel.com is my website. I try to be the easiest person to find. I know some people have like a brand and it's like red click this and red image. No. Josh Fogel, JOSHFOGEL. You put that in and you please find me. I love seeing other creatives. I get people who follow me and I love following people back and seeing what people are doing. So yeah, joshfogel.com. At Josh_Fogel. And I do that. You can't see this, but I'm doing that with an eye roll because there's some guy who has a dead account that's just Josh Fogel. And I've been trying. So he has like, it's private. He has like one post. He has like 6 followers. And I'm like, gimme. But whatever. It's fine. At Josh_Fogel or joshfogel.com. Or you can email me at josh@joshfogel.com. Or whatever. Or if you didn't like this, then it's at Bearded Immaculate Conception on Instagram.
That's the best outro ever. Oh my God, that's amazing. Shout out Christian.
Yes.
Yeah. So have you reached out to Josh Fogel at Josh Fogel and just said, give me your freaking account, bro? Like, yeah. And nothing.
Yeah. DMs have gone unread. Yeah.
That son of a bitch. Well, people like that, I feel like don't even check. They're like not on Instagram for Instagram's sake. It's just they were on in like 2014 and, decided to say, screw it, I'm done. So,
right. Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Josh. This was awesome talking to you. And thank you for sharing all of your stories and everything. This is going to be a great episode. So I look forward to releasing it. And I really look forward to seeing what else you come out with. I know you have a bunch of projects that you're going to release soon. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Man, I am so grateful for the opportunity. I have seen the list of people that you've had on this program, and I was super stoked when you asked me to be a part of it. So I am grateful. Keep doing what you're doing. This creative conversation is so invaluable. So I look forward to seeing the better people that you have on your show.
Stupid.
I don't know. That was not even a sentence? That was like the worst sentence. I don't know.
That was so good. Awesome.
Yeah,
thank you. And I will chat with you soon.
All right, bud. Thank you again. Be well.
Thank you so much for watching and listening to this week's episode of the Creative Lotus Podcast. And a huge thank you to Josh Fogel for all of his creative insights and personal stories. This week's Buddhist quote of the day is, unless we view things with our hearts, we can see nothing. But if we look at the world with a love of life, it will reveal its beauty to us, by Daisaku Ikeda. Thank you so much for listening and watching again. Please go ahead and check out the description below for all the links to Josh's social media, as well as his website, along with our social media and our website. Oh my. Until next time, I say, let's talk creative on the Creative Lotus Podcast. Thank you so much. I'll see you later. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Creative Lotus Podcast. I'm your host, Alan Zaki. Please go ahead and subscribe, rate us, and write a review. And follow me at Alan Zaki on social media. I look forward to having more amazing creative dialogues on the next episode.